Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome to this session. I think I have counted 4 continents joining us today based on the hellos I've been receiving in the chat box. So please do say your hellos in the chat box to everybody today. So welcome to this session. It's on strategies to achieve personalized learning in a secondary classroom. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, but there will be an opportunity at the end of the session to ask questions as well. But not only put questions in the chat box, if you have experience of personalized learning or you've had an idea that you've implemented in your class, please do share it with everybody participating today. We always get better through sharing. So I'll be looking forward to seeing your comments there. So today's session, we will cover, what is personalized learning? Why have you turned up for this webinar on a Friday afternoon? How can we start to implement this idea in class? And what do we really need to think about if we are going to do that? So let's turn our attention firstly to what is personalized learning. Well, unfortunately, there is no agreed definition. You look at different methodology books and different experts, and they all say slightly different things about it. But when I think about personalized learning, I think about this kind of definition, that we're moving away from an I do classroom, meaning the teacher is doing lots of things, to a you do classroom. That's inviting the students to participate more in their learning journey. So for me, it's very much moving away from everybody doing the same assignments in class at the same time, everybody going towards the same goal, and coming away from what we call this lockstep teaching approach. Lockstep refers to the idea that we are all locked in doing one activity together, and we all wait until everybody in the class has finished that particular activity before we move on to the next one. That can be frustrating for students who tend to get through material quite quickly, and doubly frustrating for those students who need a little bit of extra time in order to understand and to process. So instead, what we're looking towards is students having a lot more choice about how they engage with and practice the language. And through that, they are also showing you how they have understood the material. So instead of you setting one task that all the students are going to do to practice, for example, a passive structure, a grammar structure, they're actually going to be choosing something to show you that they've understood it. So it makes it a little bit more fun in the classroom as well, from both your perspective and the students. Why do we want to start looking at personalized learning? It's to do with lots of positive things. In this 21st century world, with many different media, things, opinions, globalization, students are looking at the world in a different way, and they are realizing that they can be autonomous. They do have lots of choice for where they get their material from, where they're learning English from. So therefore, by offering them the same kind of choice in class, we are empowering our students to take control of their learning. And if they develop these kind of habits now in the classroom with you, then they're going to hopefully apply those same habits when they get to university and the world of work, where there are fewer authority figures looking out for them, and they should be expected to self-regulate and achieve deadlines by themselves. And of course, if students are thoroughly enjoying the classroom atmosphere, having lots of choice for how they have fun and show themselves to be able to speak a language, this will obviously lead to motivation and engagement with our language. And ultimately, our students will just take off in their learning of a foreign language. So the idea that underpins personalized learning comes a lot from Bloom's taxonomy. If you haven't seen this before, this is an idea of learning that was developed by Benjamin Bloom in 1956, but I am showing you a more updated version from 2001 that reflects how we learn anything. It could be a foreign language, it could also be another skill. So It starts off with students needing to know the basics, the foundations of something before they're able to use something with ease and with confidence. So with language learning, we often have very basic items at the beginning, such as remembering what a verb means in language one. How do we spell it? Yeah, what are some of the grammar rules involved with that? So this remembering. What is that verb? How do I quickly translate that? And then understanding how to put it in a sentence. These are the basic building blocks before we can then move with ease to talk. We then can show our understanding by applying the language, making some parallelisms with our own language. We can start to use this language in order to question things, organize things, make connections. And then finally, once we've really got the hang of a particular piece of vocabulary or grammar or skill with writing or speaking, we can then choose it so that we can communicate with this language to mean exactly what we say. And a lot of times you hear the word nuance coming up here. So it means that students are able to apply just the right piece of grammar or just the right bit of vocab or tone or body language to really communicate what they mean. They're playing and they're using the language for themselves. This is the last part of the pyramid, the most difficult part, creating and evaluating. Okay, so this idea of personalized learning is based on this, that we still need to put in place the building blocks, but we're offering our students a little bit more choice with how they're going to remember it, how they're going to apply it, and how they're going to be creative with it. I really like this ladder as well. This comes from two writers, Newton and De Silva, and they took this pyramid idea from Bloom, and they thought about, okay, now let's look at some of the verbs that teachers use when designing tasks for students or choosing tasks, and let's put it in an order of easy, or the most fundamental parts, the remembering part, the understanding part, all the way up to the applying part. And so for me, I love this list of verbs because it helps me as a teacher to plan the right activity. So for example, if I'm introducing something new, then we might need to order something. For example, adverbs of frequency. Often we're asking our students to order those in a particular way, or we're asking our students to memorize something. So I can design a task knowing that I'm hitting the basic building blocks. And then all the way up the ladder, I can maybe have a task that involves some kind of rearrangement or measurement using those verbs there. So it really guides me as a teacher how to help my students to choose the right kind of activity. So for me, I think this is really useful. So this idea of personalized learning sounds great, yes, but then the fundamental question is, gosh, how do we actually do this in class? What do I need to do as a teacher? And how can I get my students on board with this? Making sure they are actually speaking the target language as well. So I'm just going to show you 10 ways in which you can implement personalized learning. I'm only going to tell you on a sort of very general level about these 10 steps. If you like any of those 10 steps and you think that that will really work with your class or your institution, then go away and look more into it and how you can implement it. But I'm going to give you the 10 things that I've tried out in class and that I think for me work really nicely. The first thing that personalized learning promotes is the use of technology in class. So if you are lucky enough to be able to work in an institution where students can access laptops, iPads, mobile phones, or even access them at home, or you're still doing online learning with your class, for example, and they have a digital course book, then educational technology can really help you. Now, we have a lot of companies out there that offer a big complete package, but obviously I'm going to show you what Pearson can offer you today. We are looking at the Wider World books today. So if you see any course book pages, they're going to be from Wider World, 2nd edition. So the first thing I want to say to you is when you are teaching your students, the first thing you have to do is know your course book package and all the elements within, inside and out. You have to know what the students are able to access, because from there, you're offering them lots more choice. So instead of only being focused on things from the student book, you can guide your students to choosing something just as fun from the workbook or from the extra resources with the games. But obviously you can't do that unless you know the content like the back of your hand. So first tip is know your resources. Then the nice thing about Pearson English Connect is we can also tailor different tests to our students. So instead of everybody taking the same test, we can take different elements from different course books, not just the Wider World second edition, but here I also have access to Focus and Formula, and I can take bits of tests from those books as well to craft a more personalized test for students. And then we've also got this magnificent software that shows me at any given time how my students are doing. And I'm going to show you an example of this. And this is from a class I've got with Focus, second edition. As you can see, I have a complete overview as to the status of my students. I can see what they're doing really well in. I can see areas needed for improvement. And I can see real red danger zones of, okay, both the student and I maybe need to have a little readjustment of learning goals and a little bit of extra practice. Now I have access to seeing all the students, but each student has access to their own data. They can't see their friends, but they can also see their own progress. And from there, the student takes on this idea of responsibility for their learning. You know, I'm very good at listening activities, but I think my teacher's going to say that I need to improve a bit my grammar. So I'm going to self-direct myself towards the grammar, and I can repeat activities again and again until I feel really confident in that. Educational technology gives you this ability to have this amazing overview and to give students a choice and saying, you know, okay, you know, you tried that activity in the student book. Okay, I can see that we had a problem. Let's now go to the extra resources. Why don't we play this kind of game in order to practice the thing you're not sure of? So it helps me to know where my students are at any given moment. And then on top of that, we can also offer our students choices with mobile games. This is something that Pearson uses. It's an application called Mondly, and it's really fun and it's really engaging for students. They can do this in class if you have the technology and it complements the lesson and their learning goals, but they can also choose to do this at home as part of homework or indeed for fun. Now, there are lots and lots of different educational institutions that offer you technology to help you to keep an eye on your students and to know their progress. So check them out and see all the different ways that you can support your students there. Now, the second thing we can implement in class is something called choice boards. So here's a typical course book page, and I've magnified sort of the two big things that the students are working on here. Here they are looking at the different verb patterns. So for example, some verbs, the next verb that follows comes with an ing pattern, for example, finish, look forward to, and some come with the to infinitive and so on. So that's the main input there for this class. And the final activity is in pairs, write some tips on how to use a gadget, practicing those verb patterns. Great, nice final activity. It's something that the students can do. But remember, we're trying to move away from the lockstep teaching approach where everybody does the same thing at the same time, because not everybody would be engaged perhaps with writing with a partner. Some people yes, some people no. So that's when we come in and say, it's you that's learning this language. Find something that engages you. Okay, so this is a choice board. This choice board could be on the whiteboard. You can quickly write down some things. You don't have to draw the pictures. This could be a handout, or this could be on a Google Doc, on a Google Drive, or something like that that you share with your students. And here is a variety of ways in which students can demonstrate that they've understood the verb patterns, and they're going to try to use it in different ways. So I've got a range of things: invent a game on Kahoot, go and practice things in the workbook, make a grammar presentation for future classes, invent a card or a board game, a variety of things. Then going back to the verbs and going back to the levels of difficulty that we looked at earlier here, I've looked at the activities that I've assigned, and we might want to show our students what stage of the pyramid they're on, ranging from the most basic use of how to demonstrate understanding of the pattern to really manipulating the language for your own use and communication. So here, as you can see, the steps are colored from the light blue all the way up to the purples and the pinks. And so therefore, we can also color code our activities so that students are aware what the ease, shall I say, or the level of difficulty each task can bring. So you have to communicate, obviously, what the colors mean. And you don't have to use these colors. You can use any kind of colors. You can also organize it so that the, let's say, more basic ones are at the top, on the top first line, and then they get progressively harder. It's up to you how you organize it, but your students should be made aware of what they're choosing and why they're choosing it. Okay, so for me, the bluer ones are the more basic showing of understanding, and the pink ones are the more difficult ones. Now, I don't suggest that you throw this amount of choice at your students from the very beginning that you first implement this. I think you need to build up slowly, because it can be quite overwhelming for students. You know, they all might go, oh, I'm going to do the Kahoot game. But actually, there are some students that would benefit more from something more challenging. So first of all, I would give maybe just 3 options, okay? And it's also, students need to be trained in how to make good choices and how to challenge themselves. It doesn't come naturally. So if you just limit the choices to start with, this is a really good tip, okay? And then as students become more aware of what this is, and okay, my teacher's letting me choose, this is really exciting, you can then offer more choice to them. But if you do, we do need to have some considerations, okay? So whenever we give students a task, there's usually some kind of instruction that they need to follow. For example, how long is the task? Do they need a link to a website or resources? Where are you going to put that information? Is it going to be later on in the handout? Is it going to be on the board? Is it going to be laminated in a corner? Think about that. How are students going to access the instructions? Will you set up workstations? Workstations means, for example, everybody who wants to work on the Kahoot game goes and sits in the back of the room. Even though they're working in partners, they're all sort of collectively there so they can support each other, perhaps. Everybody who's going to do a Google drawing goes to the other side of the room. Are you going to set up different stations? Will students choose who they work with? And this is something that comes up a little bit later with personalized learning, that giving the ability of students to choose who they work with is also showing signs of maturity and also getting them to enjoy the process of learning, okay? Do you have the class that's mature enough to make those good decisions? And then, of course, as always with our teen students, we still need to reinforce basic classroom management. So you've obviously set at the beginning of the year your rules, your contract with your students. It's a good idea to just remind them of that. You know, we are here to learn English. I will be expecting you to work together in English. You know, here are some phrases on the board to help you to communicate in English with your friend. So still making sure that we've set up the task, they're going to work together nicely, and everything is as it should be in a classroom setting. So after choice boards, we have another way you can implement a touch of personalized learning in your class, and that's through flexible seating. So sometimes when we work in a classroom or an academy, the seats are in rows, and we've got 30 plus students perhaps we're teaching to. Are you able to change that seating arrangement? Because for me, if we can move the tables and we can move them into small clusters or horseshoe shape, or even having students standing up or sitting down on cushions. It adds an element of trust in the students, that they can work with their partner without being necessarily watched all the time by you. It also brings students together cohesively, and it's also quite interesting as well, mixes things up. So if you can change the seating, I really would. It's very motivating, and sometimes I'm guilty of this myself. When a class is in a row, I tend to, project my voice, so the middle section of the class gets a lot of my facial expressions. But rarely would I, come down and talk to the front row or make sure I'm there at the back row. Okay, so by mixing up the seating, you can change the dynamic where you're teaching to or talking to, and also perhaps you're not in that position of power, shall I say, at the front of the class. You're handing over to your students to take control and sit in the right groups. Another element that students can benefit from is the idea of flipped learning. This is another concept, and I'm sure that you've attended webinars and read all about this, but it does complement personalized learning really well. So let me give you a bit of an overview in case you're not so sure about the term. Here's an example of our page, our course book. This is further practicing the verb ing and the to infinitive. This is later on in the book where we are we're asking our students to watch a video call. So we're doing like a listening and a watching. And of course, the grammar is embedded and modeled within this. Okay, so we have students watching the video call. Then they're going to do a comprehension question. Then they study the grammar box after that, of course, finding the patterns. And then they do a little closed activity. So all very standard. But my point of view is students can actually do this at home, especially if they have a digital course book. But if they don't, they have a traditional course book, they can as well, if you upload a link to the video or the audio. Now, why are we asking our students to do this at home? Well, it allows students to watch things multiple times. There are some students who can watch once and away they go. They're enjoying it. And there are some that need multiple watching times. And if you're in a class of secondary students, rarely do you have a student who will admit to needing to watch something multiple times. And also there are some students that don't need that, and it's wasting their time if they see it again. But it's personalized. Students can make that choice. How many times do they watch it? They can look at the grammar at their own pace. They don't have to feel that they're trying to catch up to someone. They can take their time. And I like it because it employs real world skills. When I'm learning, I live in Spain and I'm learning Spanish. And when I don't understand something, I quickly ask my friend, quickly on the WhatsApp, what's this and how do I use it? And I quickly turn to a search engine, for example, Google, and I say, what is this? What is this verb? What does this mean? I don't understand. Is it similar to my language? And that's real world skills. And when students are at home doing this, they're actually doing things for themselves, which is what we're encouraging our students to be anyway, a lot more autonomous. So I think that it really helps them to understand something. So when they come to class, they're doing the more difficult parts with you. Of course, the more difficult parts are the more communicative parts, the speakings and the writings and all the fun activities, because they need you to help them to give feedback when it hasn't gone well, to correct pronunciation, to help them with extra learning strategies, and to practice all kinds of English, not just the target language. And that's what we want to dedicate a lot of our class time to doing. So for example, here in this course book, we've got 2 lovely final activities. We've got answer questions in pairs. So practicing some vocabulary, and they need to also do write 5 sentences. Okay, so this is the stuff they need you for. Okay, they can look at the vocabulary before they come to class, and then the conversation will be much more focused. And you can talk to a pair, change pairs, practice again with feedback. So you don't have to do an activity just once. You can do it multiple times, and you can add in more communicative things or more choice boards to help students practice their English. But of course, the golden question, what do I do if my students haven't done the work before class? Very valid, and this can frequently happen. So I've got a few things for you here. Why not allow the students who have done it at home to quickly teach the students that haven't, okay? It allows the students to teach and to absorb the information again and to communicate it well, and it allows the students that haven't done it in order to catch up to the class, okay? Another thing you can do is allow the students who have done the activities at home to go and do the more communicative, fun stuff. Well, I say fun, I think everything in English is fun, but maybe the things that they've chosen to do that are more fun. And then you go back to the sort of more traditional thing and do the activities that are essential for them to do in order to complete the more communicative activities from the book. And also ask as well. Sometimes we might judge our students and go, oh, you don't treat English seriously, you never do the homework, but actually there might be a really good reason why they can't do it. Perhaps a sister has the laptop at home and we can't access the material, and therefore we're always a bit behind with our course. So a gentle inquiry, why didn't you do that? What did you have a problem with? How can we help you? You know, do they need to cut 10-minute break of lunchtime in order to access the material because sister has the laptop at home? You know, we can find solutions. If they're still having problems with doing this and there doesn't seem to be a reason why they're not doing this, then it's a further discussion with parents. It's a further discussion with your head teacher. The next thing to think about then is bringing in the different personalities of your class into personalized learning. We know that every student is different, even within the same country, town or city. You're going to have students of different ethnicities, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different experiences, different family setups. And encouraging our students to come in and to share and to focus on their background brings us together as a class, brings us together generally as a society. So I'm really, really for this kind of learning. And Wider World Second Edition takes this very, very seriously as well for global citizenship. So, for example, we've already seen a couple of these tasks already earlier on in the webinar, where the final activity is called Your World. So it invites students to talk about their experiences, okay? So here on the left side, we've got talk about your plans for the weekend. It gives some things they might want to think about, but they don't have to talk about that, okay? The next activity, make these sentences true for you, okay? Everybody will have a different answer. We've also got this concept in the course book called visible thinking, okay? And so we have... in this activity, it's about organic shopping, and it challenges the students to think, you know, where do you get your food from? How fresh is it? What's your opinion on farmers markets or supermarkets? So it's bringing students real world into it, you know, thinking, where do I shop? Where do my parents shop? And then, of course, we also have a task in the book called Set for Life, which is a bigger project. And here it says that they have to plan a charity event. But of course, we can tweak this just slightly. Why not plan a charity event from your town, your city, your country? We don't have to plan a charity event for the countries that are far away from us that we think need the charity. I think charity often, well, to quote the well-known saying, charity begins at home. So asking students to look at their living areas, it can only be a good thing, okay, to really understand where they're from. Another concept to help personalize learning is to let students teach. You don't have to necessarily do all the teaching. And remember, from the beginning of the webinar, it's moving away from an I do to a you do. This often works well with little grammar presentations or helping students to understand a concept, a wider concept. And I love this because if you allow students to teach something to the class, learning happens 3 times. Firstly, imagine that we're asking a small group of students to give a presentation on the present perfect, let's say. The learning happenings first, because the small group of students have to truly understand the material and learn it in order to teach it. Then learning happens again because they have to give the presentation. So they're solidifying what they know and making sure they have learned it properly. And very often students ask questions. The audience always asks questions. So again, it's helping them to learn how to explain something. And then learning happens for the 3rd time because the students who are listening to the presentation are learning as well. So I love letting my students teach because it encourages, of course, 21st century skills of leadership and being confident in your speaking. Now, it doesn't have to be anything as daunting as 4 or 3 students presenting to the whole class. It could be pair work. It could be small group work, and we can always rotate around. So these 3 are going to teach something this week, a different set of 3 are going to teach something next week, and you can manipulate how that learning is happening. The next idea is very connected to the choice boards that we saw at number 2. It's very similar. Instead, it's called a playlist of final production activities. So the choice boards are very much still you crafting 3, 4, 5, 9, whatever activities for students to do, with a bit more of informed choice as to the difficulty level that they're going to do, encouraging students to make the right choice as well. The playlist is a little bit more open-ended, so I'm going to show you what it looks like. This is a playlist. It is literally 101 final project ideas that students can show you that they have understood a particular item that they've been looking at. So here on the right-hand side, I have the activity from the book. And it's about making a list of healthy and unhealthy foods, comparing your list with other people. This is fine. This might be an activity that engages your students and they might want to do this. But if they look at the 101 ways, they might go, oh, I think it'd be really fun if we did a 3-minute mock trial of people and what they eat and judging them to be healthy eaters or unhealthy eaters. And in that way, suddenly they're more motivated, they're more engaged. They're still showing you the same language. They're still demonstrating that they can use that vocabulary, use that countable and uncountable language, but they're just doing it in a different manner. Now, to show 101 things to your students, of course, very overwhelming, can often lead to disagreements as to which one they choose and where and how. So for me, I like to introduce 10 at a time so that students can understand what exactly are the tasks, what it looks like, and then every week we add a little bit more. And if I'm lucky enough to have a class, the same class next year, they already know these kind of activities, and in class they can show me and they can choose how they would like to show me the language. Now, personalized learning is also very complementary with the idea of formative assessment rather than summative assessment, because formative assessment helps to shape students' choice. And I'm sure you know the difference between formative and summative. Just in case, there's a little summary here. Formative happens on the go as you're teaching. It could be that you choose a final output, a quick talk with the partner, but you're listening and you're assessing. But the students know that you're doing that. And the students know the criteria for success, you know, what they should be doing to get a good score from you. But the idea is you're listening, you're giving feedback, and you're shaping them to be better the next time they repeat a similar task. Whereas summative, we're waiting a lot of the time. Usually it happens at the beginning of a course, middle, an end, and it tests absolutely everything. Sometimes it tests things they've not even studied as well. But formative can help our students to choose areas of potential difficulties to work on and to praise them when they're doing things really well. Now I'm going to move on to rules and goal setting, and apologies, because really this should be at the #1 spot. So I am going to move it to the #1. There you go. But I couldn't really talk about rules and goal settings without you having seen some ideas for how personalized learning can happen. So if I'm talking to you about every child can have their own different way of learning, different way of showing you how to do things, then obviously they all have different goals. But how can we do that with a large classroom? Well, rules, I refer to sort of the classroom contract. You know, we do need to make sure that our students are going to work hard in class, speak English, respect their partner. The goal setting is very personal. How can we do this? Think about goal setting around 3 different ways. It could be about performance, effort, or habits. So performance is the one we know best. Performance is, for example, here I've got, I want to score at least 60% correct answers in the workbook activities. So they're going to make steps in order to study hard before taking on some workbook activities. It could also be based upon, you know, can-do statements. You know, I can order in a restaurant. I can complain to someone. Those kind of can-do statements as well. Okay, so they're the ones we're most used to. But we can also introduce effort, especially if our students haven't been showing effort or motivation in class. So here we've got a goal of, I want to speak at least 50% of the class in English. Great, wonderful, especially if you've had someone that's not been doing that and has been a bit disruptive. And we can also do habits, implementing good habits. We know routines and habits are the goal to success in a lot of language learning. So for students who struggle to do their homework when they go home, that can be their goal as well. And on the right-hand side, I have a handout where, depending on how frequently you see your students, they put their goal. This is a weekly one, but you can obviously do it for monthly, quarterly, half a year. It doesn't matter. They can also have more than one goal as well, but try not to complicate things. Students have to fill in the steps they are taking or the steps they have done to achieve that. So that could be, I did the activities the teacher, you know, laid out for me. I chose this and I chose this, okay, in our choice boards. But then the second part is reflection. Remember, students are in charge of their learning. So they are in charge, of course, of understanding where it went perhaps a bit wrong and the steps they can take to make it better. It is okay to make mistakes and to go off your learning goal, you know, and that's when the teacher can come in and have those dialogues with the students. So, you know, what did I do today to achieve my goal? How can I do it better tomorrow? Okay. The final thing I want to show you is something called station rotation. It's technically not quite pure personalized learning, but if you're in an institution or an academy and all of this has been quite overwhelming and you think, oh gosh, I'm not sure if I can implement these things, I think you can implement station rotation as a starting point. This is what station rotation looks like. And it's the, you are setting up different places in the classroom where different activities happen, and students rotate around those different activities. So here is an example of a 40-minute English class, and students have been divided into 4 groups, and the 4 groups are in different places. Okay, so one group will stay with a teacher for some input for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, a noise is made and they go on to the next set of stations. They have to do an activity in pairs for 5 minutes, and then another activity with their pair for 5 minutes, and then another noise is made, a bell or some kind of signal, and they get up and they rotate to the next station for a different activity. So in this way, you can design activities that are more communicative or more writing focused at a different station, or reading station, a listening station, a vocab station, so that we're hitting multiple skills. And students, when they arrive at the independent stations, Maybe you've introduced different level or different challenged worksheets or games or whatever you want to do. Okay, so not everybody is doing the same worksheet or the same activity or task, but maybe they're choosing, oh, this one is about my level of challenge, I want to do this one. Okay, don't worry. A lot of teachers worry, oh, if I put an easy worksheet down or a task, all my students are going to choose that one. They don't. They might at one point go, oh, I'm just going to choose the easy one today. But generally, students get bored. They want the right level of challenge, and they will, when they get to the station, go, okay, I think this is going to be the one that will be engaging for me, and they'll choose that one. But also, sometimes teens are funny. Sometimes they just want to do the easiest one because they're having a bad day. That's fine as well. Okay. The main thing here is make sure that you have gone around with the students to the different stations, explaining what they have to do before we then divide the class and get them on the different stations. Make sure you also have that signal, or maybe a noise or a bell or whatever, to indicate 10 minutes is up, please move to the next station. Here are a couple more examples of station rotation. The one on the left is a lot more simplified. There's only 3 stations. And the one on the right is looking at different patterns. So working individually, working in small groups, working in large groups, and so on. Now, how can we put all of these ideas together as a teacher? Well, there's a lovely little cycle here. And we're going to start with the green box, which is assess. Okay, so imagine it's the start of a school year. We want to implement personalized learning. Where do we start? With assessment. Okay, knowing your students' level. Often this comes with a level test or some kind of summative assessment. So we assess them, and let's say they are coming onto an A2, B1, this global scale of English. And we want to match our students to that global scale. So here's the Pearson Global Scale of English. I'm going to show you a screenshot, for example. This is a student who has tested into A2, almost coming into B1. And these are the things that students need to be able to do in order to break that ceiling from A2 and into B1. So this kind of global scale of English with these can-do statements can be chosen by you and the students to put in their personalized learning goals. So this can be very, very useful for the curriculum ahead. Once we've assessed our students, we obviously need to plan our lessons accordingly, looking at the 10 steps I've just shown you, giving our students lots of choice, keeping them motivated. And of course, teaching and learning happens. Students teaching other students, students learning for themselves, or students learning with you. Then, of course, check their progress. How are they doing? We can check using the technology. Where are they doing really well? Where are they not doing well and need extra support? Checking in with them can also be little tutorials, with each student at the end of the week. If you have a lot of students, that's okay. Maybe they can be telling you on a piece of paper how their week went. Maybe you can check that piece of paper where they're putting their learning goals, a bit like a diary, checking in with them, making sure they're okay. Have their goals been met? And then, of course, if anything's going slightly wrong or the goal wasn't quite met, why? Let's recalibrate, or let's try this tactic, and giving support where necessary. And then we go all the way around to assess again. If we've done our learning goal, then we need to make a new one, and the cycle begins. So now I just want to come on to some final thoughts with you to digest everything that we've looked at today. The question that we ask ourselves constantly as teachers, no matter what we're doing in class, is, I think, am I doing it right? It's just you and your students. Usually there's no one else watching you and giving you that thumbs up. So I just want to reassure you, remember from the beginning of the webinar, there's no one way to implement personalized learning in your classroom. So find the thing that best fits you and your students. Think about how you can offer choice, even on a small scale, to your students to help them improve those 21st century citizen skills. I think go slowly. So, for example, I gave you 10 examples, and there are more out there. Don't choose all 10 and implement them at once. 1 or 2, and go nice and slowly, set them up, recalibrate as necessary. Remember, it's always a process. You make mistakes, our students make mistakes, and we always say, great, lovely, glad you're making a mistake, because then we can make you better, or you can understand why. Mistakes are good. And yet when we make a mistake, it's the end of the world. Make mistakes. It's okay. We reflect, we do it better next time. Don't abandon the idea of the personalized learning, keep at it, and hopefully it will work for you. And the final thing I want to show you is a resource I found from a company called Education Elements. Lots of free resources, okay? And the website is here. It's edelements.com. And you can download this PDF, and it says, okay, if you want to implement personalized learning in the next 30 days, how are we going to do it? It is a guide for teachers. So it's not just offering resources for students, although it does that as well. So you download this. This is week 1. And it says, okay, select one practice to try this week. Okay, so remember to go slowly, build up. We've got 4 to choose from. So let's say that we're going to focus on structured choice. We liked the idea of the choice boards, for example. We wanted to implement that. Okay, it then gives you links to some resources to help you set that up. And then it also focuses your attention on how you can adjust this in class. How can you align it with the goals that your students have for their learning plan? And it really guides you as the teacher for how to set this up. You are very welcome to watch this webinar again when it goes live on YouTube next week. And from there, you'll see this screen, you'll see the web address, and you'll be able to access that material from the website, okay? So we've come to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your time. To conclude, in this session today, we have looked at what is personalized learning. We've looked at 10 ways that we can try to implement this in class. And we've also looked as well at how we might do that. What do we need to consider if we are going to implement choice boards? Okay, so thank you very, very much for joining me on this lovely Friday afternoon.